as they join us. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Green Drinks on housing in the Upper Valley. So my name is Ginevra. I am the program coordinator at Sustainable Woodstock. We are hosting this event tonight. We are a nonprofit organization. We are founded in 2009. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and empower everyone to live environmentally, economically, and socially responsible lives. So I'm so happy to see you all joining us on this really beautiful evening. You have come to one of our Green Drinks events. These are monthly social events, typically in person, but now in the virtual space. We invite individuals, nonprofits, businesses to make short presentations on green initiatives and sustainable initiatives in the area. So tonight we have a fun one focused on housing, which is very tied to the sustainability of our community. So really excited to hear from Jill and Andrew. Before we get into that, I do want to give a quick plug for our next Green Drinks. That will be June 17th, 5:30, and is titled Green Drinks, Forest Carbon Markets for Small Landowners. So this Green Drinks is going to feature the Family Forest Carbon Program that provides landowners who are enrolled in the program with incentive payments to implement sustainable forestry practices that increase carbon sequestration and storage, and also improve the health of forests. So I will be sending a follow-up email after this, and I'll include details about that event in that email. But for tonight, before we get started, I did want to run through the agenda and how the meeting is going to operate. Right now, we are recording this presentation, and I'll also send out a link to the recording afterwards. We are also on Facebook Live. Everyone joining us, you're currently muted and your video is off. So if you have questions that come up during the presentation or after in the Q&A section, please type them into the chat box on the side. If you're not familiar with Zoom, just scroll over the window that's open and there should be a little chat bubble at the bottom. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, just put your question in a comment on the video. That'd be great. And include where you're from in your question, especially if you think it's going to be relevant to the answer. Yeah, great. I think that's almost it. I will follow up with an email to everyone registered with all this info and with contact info for Jill and Andrew. So let's go ahead and get going. I'm going to read the bios of our two wonderful speakers tonight, Jill and Andrew. So first we'll go Jill. Jill Davies has been a member of the Woodstock community for the past 12 years. After years of working in the corporate world as a management consultant, she now spends her time teaching. She teaches life skills to people who want to make a change in their life and achieve their goals. That is when she's not volunteering in the Woodstock community. And then we have Andrew Winter. Andrew is the executive director of Twin Pines Housing, a nonprofit developer and provider of affordable housing in the Upper Valley region of New Hampshire and Vermont. Over his 7-year tenure, he has overseen significant growth in its multifamily portfolio from 240 units to 500, with more than 200 units in various stages of development or redevelopment, including supportive, senior, and general occupancy housing. So I think that's all for me. We're so excited to hear from you both. Welcome to Green Drinks, and I'm going to mute myself now and let you two take it away.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Glad to be here. Okay, so I'm gonna signal to Jill, and we have one presentation, and we each have pages in that presentation to do. So we're delighted to be here, and we're gonna power on to the next slide, and I'll give you a little bit of background on Twin Pines.
We just have a technical issue because it's not paging. Hold on.
There you go. So for those of you not familiar with Twin Pines, we are a developer of affordable housing for folks in the Upper Valley with low and moderate incomes. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means and who we serve, because there are a variety of different programs and different options in terms of who we serve. But we are a nonprofit. We were founded in 1990. There was a nonprofit affordable housing group on the Vermont side, one on the New Hampshire side, and they got together and created the Twin Pines housing that we know today. And as Ginevra said at the front end, we have 500 rental units, 23 properties. About 60% of those are in New Hampshire, and 191 representing 40% of our portfolio is in Vermont. In addition to rentals, we also have 56 shared equity home ownership properties. We'll talk a little bit about that as the presentation proceeds, and what that means. And we're actually trying to create some more. So we're going to be talking specifically about one opportunity in Woodstock that's going to be coming up and that we're really excited about, with 4 new homeownership units in Woodstock. And then we also have 139 rental units in various stages of current construction, and then additional units in pre-development. Over 1,000 people are housed. And we have a staff that kind of does everything soup to nuts within the affordable housing and real estate development world, everything from project development to property management and resident support services. Resident support services is one of the things that kind of sets us apart as a nonprofit entity from our for-profit peers. But we have folks who are very much focused on supporting residents in our rental housing with COVID and what has gone on in COVID, in going on in the larger economy. We've really found that program of resident support services, linking people to services in the community where they live, has been critically important in keeping people healthy and housed. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jill to talk about the Woodstock Community Trust.
So the Woodstock Community Trust is a non-profit organization based in Woodstock, obviously, working to strengthen our community. And our mission covers both housing, commercial spaces, and preservation of agricultural land. So we're most interested in a sustainable economic and environmental future, but we've allowed ourselves the latitude to do many different things. The organization was founded in 1997, and then we revitalized it more lately, 2019. We're a 501c3, which allows us to take donations and offer tax deductions. We're governed by a board of directors of Woodstock and Pomfret residents. And right now we have projects happening that work on housing and public access. So that's specifically the East End Park. And all of our funds are from private donations.
So, delighted to be here talking about affordable housing today, because this is obviously something near and dear to the hearts of those of us here at Twin Pines, but it is obviously a topic of much discussion here in the Upper Valley. Keys to the Valley, a recent effort, a collaborative effort between 3 regional planning commissions that touch on the Upper Valley, both on the New Hampshire side and the Vermont side, including Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission, have estimated that we're short about 10,000 homes. Now they're looking at a snapshot of 2010 to 2030 over the next, sort of looking retrospectively and prospectively. We need to be kind of creating roughly 500 units a year across the Upper Valley. And we're not doing that consistently and providing a variety of housing types that we need. So this is a critical business issue. We're seeing it, we're hearing it from folks in the business community, we're hearing it from government entities, and we're obviously hearing it on the ground and reading about it in the Valley News and elsewhere about the need for housing. What kind of housing? Well, we know on the rental side, we look at vacancies. Vacancies are very low, 1.6% in our micro NECTA, which is sort of the region in which we sit with Lebanon kind of in the middle of it, but spanning across the Connecticut River to pick up Vermont communities as well. For those of us at Twin Pines, we know that we've got a waiting list that frankly is measured in years. There are certain types of units that are more readily available, but particularly those that are subsidized for the lowest income folks in our community. They may be looking at a very long wait, particularly for subsidized one-bedroom units. Those in particular are often very hard to get. Housing prices are high, particularly in the core communities, and rents have been rising dramatically. An additional challenge for communities like Woodstock is popular tourist communities can have a very high percentage of second and seasonal homes. And in fact, one of the things that's most startling is that Vermont, followed by Maine and New Hampshire, are the three states with the highest percentage of second and seasonal home ownership in the country. Vermont statewide at 17%, and this is sort of pre-COVID. Numbers may change. We'll see how that plays out. There'll be some data that I'm going to talk about that highlights some of the demographic changes that COVID's brought about. But all of that really does create situations with a high cost of housing and limited availability for people who are living here year-round, whether in rentals or ownership. And then lastly, we have a high number of Airbnb rentals that also affects the availability of housing.
And I just want to emphasize what this year has done. So Andrew's been working in affordable housing for a long time. I've been working in it for a couple of years, and we noticed all of these things. Sorry.
It wouldn't be Zoom without something like that.
It's not supposed to be mine though. So we noticed all of these things that we needed to do, we could address within the housing market. And then the pandemic hit and everything got emphasized, and now everybody is talking about housing. So our area is under huge pressure from both renters and buyers. So there's just a huge net in-migration, it's called. And Lebanon, New Hampshire, that's not just Lebanon, that's the whole area, the Upper Valley area. Our net in-migration went up by 3.7 points. And then the chart on the right just shows how many of these properties are being sold to out-of-state buyers. So we never thought we had that many properties around, but just about everything's being sold now. And if you speak to any realtor, they've got waiting lists of people ready to come in. And what's happening in Woodstock is people are coming in with cash, buying properties without doing any kind of building inspection or appraisal. And we're into bidding wars. So many people right now have been priced out of moving into the housing market. And now we're hearing the next thing, which is that renters who are often in this area renting private homes or sharing a home are being asked to leave their home because the owner wants to sell because the prices are so good. So all of this is putting extra pressure on everybody who's involved in housing.
So what do we do? How do we solve this issue? Well, one of the ways, and there are a whole series of challenges, and we talked a little bit about it with Jill talking about some of those upward pressures. That one of the biggest additional factors is, historically we've had 1 million homes a year nationwide that have been available for purchase. And in fact, we're now seeing a national supply of housing about 450,000 units. So we're going from 1 million to 450,000, which is again creating that upward pressure as well. But we're going to try to do what we can to create additional opportunities. One of the areas that we're most focused on are households at or below 60%. There are a number of programs. We'll talk a little bit about those during the presentation. But there are additional programs that are serving folks between 100 and up to 120% of the area median. So we'll be talking about one specific opportunity again in Woodstock that serves households up to 120% of the median. But it's helpful that we talk a little bit about some of the programs and the terms that we use, and we'll use these terms again and again throughout the presentation. So I want to just make sure we've got some common language in talking about affordable housing. One of the most basic terms that we use is area median income, and that is, basically not the average, but the median, the midpoint, with half the households earning more and half the households earning less. That area median is, in our region, is determined on a county basis and is determined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, each year. And so typically that goes up. Sometimes it goes up significantly. A few years ago, Grafton County, where Hanover and Lebanon is, went up significantly. This year, we actually saw a slight decrease in some areas and a slight increase in others. And so that number can fluctuate. And then we're going to talk about subsidized housing, where residents pay 30% of their income towards rent, and the balance is subsidized by the federal government. Sometimes people refer to that as Section 8 housing. That's one program of many that the federal government has that provides a subsidy to people so that they can afford rent. And often, I often will say to people, as we talk about affordable housing, where the rents and incomes are capped, that subsidized housing is a subset. It is, if there is a glass that is this tall, that those who are in, essentially subsidized housing are one band of that larger glass. And then we talk about workforce housing. And workforce housing is manageable for households earning up to 120% of area median. We're going to talk about a homeownership opportunity there that has those higher income units, but we're actually also have a rental opportunity as well that's coming to market in Hartford that will also have units that are affordable to people up to 120% in a rental setting. So Twin Pines, as a developer, one of the things that we look for in criteria, criteria in developing new projects is those with access to town water and sewer that are near or on public transit and are near services. And in fact, the picture that you see of a project called Tracy Street in Lebanon, nice little winter setting here. It's a nice reminder that on a hot day like today, that winter's not far off. This project is actually right across the street from the Kilton Library in West Lebanon, which is a major transit hub for advanced transit. So residents who are living here actually can literally walk across the street and hop on the bus to get to any of the major employers in the Upper Valley. One of the nice things about it, and one that I want to highlight here with this group, is those black panels on the facade of the building, as well are solar panels. This building has 380 solar panels on it, between the roof, the parapet around the edge of the roof, on the facade, and then there's also another additional set of solar panels on a structure right at the front of the building, 380. The hope was that this would generate literally all of the electricity for the heating and cooling and base electrical needs of the residents. We're still working to try to get it quite right. It's not quite there, pretty darn close. But this will be one of, hopefully at the end of the day, the first net zero building where we generate all the electricity we need for the residents in northern New England of its size. This is 29 units. Beyond that, we usually try to find buildings that are in downtown areas or near them. Sometimes we do brownfields. And one of the important qualities in creating housing is density, allowing us to spread expensive costs over more units. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're bigger, and our funding comes from a variety of different funding sources, local banks like Mascoma and Ledyard and Bar Harbor, but we also rely on state and federal programs, including something called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. And then lastly, donors. Donors are a big part of how affordable housing gets done, and we'll talk about the work that they've done to help us create some affordable homeownership opportunities. So some recent projects, just to kind of give you a variety of what housing can look like. We saw a picture earlier of Safford Commons. We're finishing up some new projects in Wentworth 2 in Hartford. This is a 4-unit building that was created on an old brownfield site, Tip Top Auto. The site had burned, auto repair shop, and the soil was contaminated. So we came in and utilizing federal and state grants, we're able to clean that site up, put 4 units of housing on that. A couple of those units will be that 80 to 120 of area median income. So folks will be having higher incomes there. There'll be 1 unit that has a subsidy attached to it, and then 1 unit that will be affordable to households that's up to 60%, but with no subsidy. So they're, folks will need to have sufficient income to be able to afford the rent, but they will benefit from the fact that the rents are capped and won't be able to rise significantly over time. And then we also have Summer Park Residence, which is a project. We just finished the first phase of this. This is senior housing in Hanover. Off in the distance, you might be able to see there's a little bit of construction fencing there. We're actually getting ready. We are busy, I should say, doing the second phase of housing there with an additional 18 units. That project is subsidized, the first phase. The second phase is affordable, and we're in the market looking for some subsidy from the federal government, hoping to be able to subsidize all of those senior units. So those are age-restricted units. And this project is right across from the high school in downtown Hanover, on public transit, across from the Co-op Food Market. It's an amazing site, and we're really pleased to have worked with the town of Hanover to create this opportunity. We talked a little bit about Tracy Housing, which is general occupancy housing, no age restrictions. So we have a number of seniors who live there, but that's, again, nice photo in the summer. But that is, again, passive house certified, so very energy efficient, but also trying to be net zero. And then we talked a little bit about scattered sites projects. We actually aggregated a number of smaller individual projects together with common financing to be able to do the Hartford Scattered Sites project, which basically allowed us to redevelop a number of sites in Hartford.
So that's a lot about rental properties, and what Woodstock Community Trust wanted to do was to really get involved in home ownership opportunities, and specifically for moderate income people. So what we learned was that it's really difficult to enter the home ownership market in Woodstock. Single family homes are really expensive, and they're limited with that so many homes owned as seasonal or second homes. And what happens is that a 2-income family and sometimes a 1-income family is really ineligible for those programs we saw before at 120% AMI. So there are teachers, municipal employees like fire, police and highway, nonprofit executive directors, school support staff. And if one part of the family is earning this annual income, and then you add a second income onto it, you're often above that 120% level, which starts at 66,000. So we've discovered that many people are leaving the community to buy houses elsewhere, and we wanted to keep them in the community. So we've been working on a housing program, and we set the level of the median income to 175% of AMI. So that's talking more about $100,000 income for the household. And what we can do then is extend this. So our program is the one on the bottom. So in Woodstock, there's several rental opportunities, subsidized, affordable, and workforce housing. And then there's also that grant program. So you can get, if you're 120% of AMI, you might be able to get help with purchasing a home. And then the Woodstock housing program at the end, which I'll talk more about now. So we have a very specific type of home that we want to create, and it's called the missing middle housing. So this is a term used nationally. And really what it's saying is, in our community, in many communities now, we are missing this middle housing. The duplexes, the fourplexes, courtyard buildings, townhouses, we don't really have many of those. In Woodstock, we have lots of the large second home, large homes, and and then some shared homes. So there's many of these houses that might look like one big one. They're actually multifamily. So we already have quite a lot of those. We wanted to create more. So we spent some time creating a program where we invest to purchase that missing middle home. And then we spend money and rehab it to reduce any future repair costs and energy costs. And then we provide a down payment grant to keep the house affordable. So what we discovered was that many people can afford a regular mortgage payment, but they can't afford the different things that are required to buy a house. So often it's really difficult to save money. And if you don't save a decent percentage of your purchase price, you end up paying a higher mortgage rate than somebody who can put a decent amount down. And then many of the houses that we have in Woodstock are really old. So you need a big chunk of cash to do repairs and make the building energy efficient. So we do that for the buyer, and then we provide that down payment. And we do the down payment so that we can keep the house affordable in perpetuity. We sell the homes to qualified buyers, and we favor locals. So we spent a long time building this program so that it's legal with all of the Fair Housing Acts in Vermont. And we are very specific about who we favor. So our homes, we only sell to full-time residents. They have to have a household income of 140,000 or less. They must be approved for mortgage financing so that they're a stable buyer, and they can't rent or use the home for business except as zoning laws allow. And then if we have more than one person who wants a property, we put in our preferences. So it's a point system, and you earn a point if you're a local resident of the school district or Heartland or Queechee. If you're a Woodstock employee or a business owner, you get points. If you're someone with a child who will attend one of the Woodstock schools, you get points. And you get a point if you have a higher credit score and a lower income. So far we've done 3 homes. And our first one in 2019 was a single family home in the village. So we purchased the home in 2019, we rehabbed it to improve the insulation, and then we were able to sell it just a few months later to somebody that had been looking to live in our community. And so it's a family with a child in the school. Then this year we sold a house that we had divided up into 2 condos. So we bought the house. We actually bought it at the end of 2019. We got a little delayed by the pandemic, but there were already 2 living spaces in there for a mother and daughter. So we made it into condos. We rehabbed the homes, which took quite a lot more than that first house we did. We had to put in energy efficient boilers and instant hot water heaters. We did a lot of work on insulation. We put in new doors and windows, and some of the bathroom fixtures and appliances need to be fixed as well. So this was more of a makeover than that previous one was. So we've been able to sell this to 2 different families here, and given those people a chance at having affordable monthly expenses and security, as you can see in that quote there. And we get to keep those people in our communities instead of having them move out to find something that they can afford.
So one of the opportunities that Twin Pines is excited about to be working on and is a site that we originally developed with the Woodstock Community Trust, Safford Commons. This was a 28-unit rental project that was, we started construction in 2014 after a long and complicated legal fight, and finally completed those first 28 units in 2015. And we are now looking to move forward with the next phase. So when we permitted that project way back in 2007, the plan was to build 28 rental units and then do 8 home ownership units. And after efforts working with Habitat for Humanity, we ultimately decided to develop this on our own in conjunction with a group called Evernorth, formerly Housing Vermont, part of our development team from the rental phase, along with the Woodstock Community Trust. And we're going to be building 4 homes. Those first 4 homes will be breaking ground June 1st. We have signed our construction contract. We've got our permits in hand, and we're ready to go. There'll be 2 2-bedroom and 2 3-bedroom homes. Those will be affordable to families with incomes between 80 and 120% of the area median. So as you may recall, $66,000 to $94,000, depending on family size, 1 to 4 people per household. But basically affordable to households at that 80 to 120% of area median. The 2-bedroom units will be priced at $185,000, and the 3-bedroom units at $222,000. And for those of you who've looked in the home buying market recently, there is nothing that is going to be affordable at that or available at that price point in the marketplace. A quick survey that I did a few weeks ago looked like there was nothing under $400,000 in Woodstock. I think there might have been 1 condo available in the $300,000 range. So this is a very affordable product for somebody, particularly for somebody who might have been renting and is looking to be a home buyer for the very first time. Again, there are income restrictions that go with this, but the goal is to try to create housing that will be affordable not just to the first home buyer, but affordable in perpetuity. And we do that through the use of a restrictive covenant, and we share in the equity that is created over time in the home, limiting that to 25%. So home buyer buys it, they go to sell it, their appreciation, they're able to recognize 25% of their appreciation over the ownership period. 75% stays with the home, and that helps keep it affordable. So construction, as I said, is starting in June. We're expecting about a 9-month construction schedule. We'll talk a little bit about COVID. COVID has definitely made construction harder. Anybody who's buying anything construction related or trying to do any of that right now knows how expensive it is. But we hope to finish the homes in March of 2022. And if you're interested in that home ownership opportunity, please contact us at Twin Pines at the information below.
And we wanted to just do one more slide because the Keys to the Valley survey has really shown how communities can support all sorts of housing creation. So they've come up with some different points for us all that we can work on. And so different towns are doing this now. So we can be reviewing our zoning regulations to make sure that there's nothing there that's an impediment and change them as necessary. So that might be on for parking or density. Each town can also survey the town-owned land and buildings for opportunities to create housing. And Andrew has stories of Hanover and Hartford doing that. We can make it easier to build accessory dwelling units. Seems to be a lot written about these days. But if somebody builds an accessory dwelling unit, that apartment above a garage and rents that out, that puts 1 more unit into the marketplace. And then everybody can also support and sponsor applications for funding for housing development so that we can try to get somewhere close to building the houses that are needed for everybody. So we put that website up for Keys to the Valley. It's a really interesting, the way they've done their work and the recommendations that they've come up with are really interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everybody.
Okay, is that it for you two?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both so much. I learned a lot myself during that presentation. So we've got Michael with us as well, our Director of Sustainable Woodstock, and he and I are going to go back and forth here on the questions that some people have been putting in the chat. Feel free to keep entering questions as they come to mind. Yeah, I think I'll start, Michael, if that's all right.
Okay.
With the first one here. How do residents in Twin Pines developments deal with transportation when the AT isn't running?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and obviously we have, where we can, have encouraged additional development of additional lines on AT. That was something we did last year here in the town of Hartford, but it continues to be a real issue. I mean, there are folks who candidly, I would see walking down Route 10 in Lebanon on a Saturday because AT is not running. Same time every Saturday. And I know that they're walking because there's not public transportation available. So it's an issue, and it continues to be an issue that a number of folks are trying to look at. One of the very interesting concepts that's been floated is the idea of trying to do ride shares and developing ride share programs that could supplement the existing public transportation network that we have. It's a challenge for folks on weekends, and it does push us to think about creating housing opportunities both in town centers, and then also thinking about where we create or what additional amenities we create for the residents. So you don't necessarily want to create housing that doesn't have access to washers and dryers. Seems like a simple thing, but for a renter who doesn't have access to it, imagine trying to take a child with you to go to a laundromat. Now add the fact that advanced transit only lets you do that on a weekday. So we, as a developer, we're focused on trying to build infrastructure that makes it a little bit easier for the residents.
Thank you, Andrew. There's another question here that kind of piggybacks on that one, I think. It just asks in relation to transportation as well, what about retired individuals?
Yeah, so, again, I think most of the projects that we've been focused on for seniors, we've been trying to do things like put the senior housing where people can walk to services, and also where they can have access to the paratransport programs that Grafton Senior Center has and that Advanced Transit has, because those, again, are very important for residents.
Thank you. Our next question. So why is Quechee considered local for Woodstock homes when it's a village of the town of Hartford? And what is Twin Pines doing to spur homeownership versus rentals in Hartford as in Woodstock? So I guess it's kind of a two-part question. So the first one, why is Quechee considered local?
Because Quechee touches Woodstock, and many Quechee people are involved in the Woodstock community. So that's why we decided it was included, although it's not included in our school district, which is often the way you draw boundaries. And drawing these boundaries is one of the hardest things and the most contentious things that nonprofits ever seem to do.
I'll touch on the topic.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, Andrew. Thanks.
Yeah. So we, there may be opportunities. We've looked at in the past at opportunities to create a small development, ownership development in Hartford. We didn't ultimately proceed with it, but we'll continue to be looking for opportunities. The other thing that I want to emphasize is, in addition to creating 4 new homes, Twin Pines, through its work with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, a state agency that provides financing for affordable housing as well as conservation efforts, is to, we've got access to a buyer-driven program that allows income-eligible households to go out and find homes in the marketplace and essentially bring them into our program. So I talked earlier about the 56 homes in our shared equity program. Many of those came to us by buyers going out, working with us accessing grant funds through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board that allowed them to basically reduce the amount of mortgage debt that they will have to pay going forward. And in doing that, bring those opportunities, essentially to the table. And they're able to acquire a home, often in Hartford. That's one of the places that's most popular. But again, I recognize how tight the market is. We're hearing stories of people, going out paying well above asking price. Starter homes are, being bid up. People are paying $15,000, $20,000 above asking price to get a home. That makes it harder, and that's why efforts like Safford Commons are so important, because we need to add housing stock, not just have people go out and be able to buy homes through the VHCP program. That's an important element, but again, we need more housing stock.
Thank you, Andrew. So the next question is, what has been Woodstock's net investment for each household? For example, the Brattleboro Healthy Homes Initiative investment is about $25,000 after sale to the new homeowners.
So the properties that we just sold in Rose Hill, so they're 2-bedroom units, and we put in $50,000 as the down payment, and then just a little bit more than that in the costs of making them condos and refurbishment. But mostly that was about it. In the home on Maple Street, that was a 3-bedroom single home, and our investment there was more like $150,000 for the down payment there and the rehab work.
So the question is asking what the net investment is. So Jill, do you have any idea after the sale, how much?
The numbers I gave you were the net.
They are, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will say, one of the differences is there is a difference in this market, particularly in places like Woodstock, between starter homes here and what they cost in Brattleboro. And so, which is why I think, Jill and the community trust have looked at a deeper subsidy, essentially, to help make those homes possible.
So if I give you the sale price of the Rose Hill properties, those were $185,000 each. And then we put in $50,000 for the down payment so that the buyers were able to buy those for $135,000.
And the nice thing about that is we were talking about the 80 to 120 of AMI. Some of those buyers were able to actually be a little bit lower income.
There seems to be a magic number in the marketplace, which is about $1,500 that you want to get people's mortgage and heating costs down to. So we were really pleased that we were able to do that with the Rose Hill properties, so that the people are not paying any more to own those than they were to rent their previous properties.
Interestingly, one of the real challenges, I was talking with another developer today, a market rate developer, and he was talking about the challenge of converting people from rentals at $1,200. If you're paying $1,200 a month in rent, it really doesn't translate to a $400,000 home. You can't make that. You can't afford a $400,000 home if you could only afford a $1,200 a month rent. And that's one of the challenges in our marketplace.
Thank you, Jill and Andrew. This is a kind of more of maybe a comment than a question, but I'd like to read it. It's from Mike at Vital Communities. Most smaller towns do not have the sewer, water, transportation to keep large projects affordable. Residents of small towns can create places to live through home share or an accessory dwelling unit. The Thompson Senior Center is supporting home share, and then he has a contact for someone there, Sherry Borzowski. I don't know of support for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, yet. So it's a comment, and if either of you want to respond.
Yep, I will. So the home share program was all set to go before the pandemic. So it's been delayed considerably. But the idea with the home share program is that people who live in homes larger than they need take in someone who needs housing they pay a rent, maybe not always a market rent, because they're there. They can also help with somebody. So a friend of mine did this in Burlington. She was an older person, a younger person moved in, and you had this perfect combination of the younger person could teach my older friend to use her internet and help set up her business, and the younger person got a place to live below the market rents. So that's a project that we hope is really going to work in Woodstock. And then your other comment about ADUs, the Economic Development Commission is looking at what we need to do in order to make accessory dwelling units more attractive to build, I think is a good word to use.
Michael, you're muted. I can see you trying to ask a question.
Could Mike or Andrew please speak about affordable housing attempts in Norwich? So I'm going to ask Mike to unmute himself. So Mike, if you could please do that.
And I'm happy to talk about that too.
Yeah, so again, the question is, could Mike or Andrew please speak about affordable housing attempts in Norwich? Thank you.
Why don't you start, Andrew?
Yeah, so Twin Pines, obviously, or maybe people don't know this, but Twin Pines a number of years ago did develop a home ownership community called Star Lake, which is 14 homes in the town of Norwich, and continues to obviously work with the homeowners. We're actually helping them as the project approaches the third decade of its existence. We're actually busy helping the homeowners there with upgrades to the water and septic systems. We 2 years ago, thanks to generous support of a Norwich resident, we were able to add solar to an adjacent parcel there, and the 14 homeowners get their electricity from that solar field. So, we continue to work on that effort, making sure that folks are able to maintain their homes in the long term there. We continue to look and work with folks at the planning board on the potential for rental housing in that town. I will say one of the challenges that we touched on earlier is the issue of water and sewer. And the town of Norwich is currently engaged in a conversation that is complicated, has multiple players in it, but is looking at the possibility of adding sewer service along Route 5, and obviously that would make it possible to potentially look at an affordable housing property or project in that town. I don't know.
Mike, did you?
Yeah, I think Mike's back on mute. I don't know if you want to unmute that.
Yeah, I'm asking him.
Oh, here I am.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I guess the only thing I'd add to that is sort of a repetition of the a little bit about the comment I made about the challenge, that the challenge of trying to do a large scale project, as you said, without the infrastructure. Another impediment to large scale projects is often, as was the case with Stratford Commons, is social resistance. A lot of change is hard for people to imagine. Little small changes that they actually don't even notice are a little easier to accept. And sometimes the one by one approach of home share or ADU goes over a little better. And so there have been Norwich and my town, Thetford, and many others have sometimes questioned, can we absorb 10 to 12 more of anything being built at one time? But we don't notice at all if someone renovates the garage and is renting. So anyway, that's just a thought. There's no magic way forward. We need all the answers, and I'm very glad to be here with Andrew and Jill as to talk about some of them.
Thank you, Mike and Andrew.
Yeah, thank you both. And for your surprise guest appearance, Mike. Hi. Next question is, does the CARES Act include funding for affordable housing? If so, how can the region access that funding?
Yeah, happy to take that one. So the CARES Act included money for rental assistance for renters who had fallen behind in their rent because of COVID-related job losses or employment losses. And it also included monies for mortgage assistance. So those funds have been expended. And I will say, we had a number of renters who lost jobs or lost hours. A lot of our folks who live in affordable housing have employment in the service sector, which, whether it's working for restaurants or retail, and suffered employment losses that made it hard to pay their rent. The good news is those funds were available, and mortgage assistance was available as well. Going forward, the American Recovery Plan that was passed early in the Biden administration does include money for affordable housing, and there in the state of Vermont, there continues to be rental assistance, something called ERAP, Emergency Rental Assistance Program, that is available through the Vermont State Housing Housing Authority. And so if you know of renters who are behind in their rent, that is a program that is definitely available. And the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, which is the state's affordable housing bank, has a mortgage assistance program as well, taking advantage of that money from the American Recovery Program. So those programs are out there. There has been talk about adding additional dollars to the pie, and the legislature and the governor have been working through that. We'll have to see how it all comes out in the wash, but there are additional funds that should be flowing to affordable housing and workforce housing over the coming years as a result of that federal money. And so we're definitely keeping an eye on how that plays out, and opportunities to create additional housing, including opportunities for the missing middle that Jill talked about.
Thank you, Andrew. A most comprehensive answer to that question. There's a lot going on. Thank you.
There's a lot going on.
Good job. The next question is, I certainly see the point of awarding applicants with the children in the school, but there is a need for single women who typically make considerably less than men, and for seniors and others. So it's more of an observation.
And I'd like to answer that though, because I think there are a lot of single parents with children who want to use our program, because in fact, really anyone with children. One of the things that home ownership gives you that rental does not give you when you rent from a private homeowner is housing stability and housing security. Because when parents think about their children going to school, they want to think about the next 8 years. And so that may be fine if you manage to rent something from Twin Pines, but if you're renting from an individual who is renting a home, as we've seen just now, those people can sell the homes whenever they like and you're out. So the marketplace for single parents is definitely there. Single parents within walking distance of the village is huge, because then the child can get to walk to where they need to get, and the parent is not a taxi service. So yeah, those are good observations. And for older people, yes, there's definitely a need too. They're not excluded from our program at all. What we did find out in the last round is that the older people who were interested in our properties, some of them had more assets than our program allowed, that we had a limit on those.
Thank you, Jill.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. Next question is there any data about the difference in housing needs and purchase price increases with COVID? Can these housing solutions keep up with this changing situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I don't know if you saw some of the data that we shared earlier. There was maybe it was our second slide or third slide with the rapid increase in the number of out-of-state home buyers. So we're seeing, significant appreciation, 25 to 26% in housing prices year over year. And that makes it really hard for people to afford housing. And as we talked about, there has been a dramatic decrease in the supply of housing. We've gone from sort of 4.5 months of housing stock available for sale down to a month's supply. And again, that upward pressure, it's going to be hard for the market in the short term to be able to address this issue. And then, and then we've talked a little bit in the past, maybe people have heard the term K-shaped recovery. And for the homeowner, somebody who has a home right now, it's been a pretty good year. Year over year, from September of 2019 to September of 2020, the collective value of homes for the American homeowner went up $1 trillion. Meanwhile, 1 out of every 4 renters is behind in their rent. And for renters, those renters getting out from underneath the rent arrearages, that's going to be a challenge. Credit will be impacted. And meanwhile, home values are going up dramatically. And it's something that we as a society, we're all trying to address here in the Upper Valley. But these are bigger issues that are going to require multiple approaches in the long term.
Thank you, Andrew. So the next question is more of a kind of an observation about the fact that when considering where Hartford and Woodstock meet each other, it's good to keep in mind that Quechee is part of Hartford, and just to be mindful of the different class distinctions that we have here in the Upper Valley. Having lived in White River Junction and Reading and Woodstock and various other places in and out of the Upper Valley, I can relate to that observation as well. These are important and real issues and perceptions and realities in the Upper Valley. So thank you for pointing that out. I'm just going to go to the next question, which is a question. Is there any projection about the future of home ownership in the Upper Valley? It's a seller's market for sure, but how soon do you think it will turn? If you can answer that question, you be able to retire right now, probably.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the other factors that we really haven't touched on much, other than my brief comment, is the cost of construction. And again, anybody who's trying to build, add on, we're obviously building a couple of projects right now, but there has been a dramatic increase. Lumber, copper, metal, sheet metal, plastics that are included in insulation, things like that. All of those materials are harder or more expensive to get and harder to get. And unfortunately, that makes it hard for me to feel positive about the construction, the ability to construct additional housing in the short term. We're hearing from people in the construction industry that it could be 2022 into 2023 before we start to see some softening or reduction in the construction materials and costs related to those materials, and that obviously has an impact in the short term.
I think that the home share program is going to be really important because that's one of the fastest turnkey things that can happen. The home's already there. Once people work out the mechanics of the system, that could provide extra housing units immediately.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure which one of you this is intended for, but it's, are you considering equity beyond financial need?
Shall I answer that one?
Sure.
So we have a limit to the equity that somebody has in the bank. So we look at assets, so it's okay to have we had to set some limits somewhere. So we set a limit of $60,000 in assets that are, I think the term's called non-retirement assets. So that we just needed cutoff points of who was eligible or not eligible. And I believe those are the same as the VHCB 120% program. We just copied them.
Next question is, are you including property taxes in that $1,500 magic number?
Yes. When you look at when you look at these numbers, you want to look at all of the costs, because many of the people that we chatted to when we were selling the units are renters. So to be faced with new bills that they're going to have, like water, sewer, property taxes, we wanted to show, we were able to show that all of those bills, all of those costs were within the $1,500 for those units.
Yeah, great, thank you.
And we have just a few more questions. Are you both okay answering them? Going a little bit over 6:30?
Sure.
Okay. This is a comment I'll just say. Looking forward to better success with Norwich's and Thetford's attempts at affordable housing, not just ADUs and home shares, especially in town-owned properties. And then the next question is, any advice for folks like myself who have to find new housing now because landlord is selling house and only has 30 to 60 days to find affordable rent or buy?
That's one of the hardest situations, and I know so many people in that situation. And I read listserv at 5 o'clock in the morning, and keep your ears open for any friends moving, and see if they're going to vacate a rental property, because it seems to be there's so many people chasing so few properties. We have had a few people with successes here who've gone after an Airbnb short-term rental and talked to the landlord about converting it and taking it on for longer term. That's another route to go.
And then an additional resource, I would say, is depending on your income and whether you might qualify for affordable housing, I would go to the VHFA website. So the Vermont Housing Finance Agency actually has a rental site or link on their site that links to a directory of available affordable housing. And sometimes people don't realize that the property right down the street is affordable housing. It does blend in. And so there are a number of properties in the Upper Valley region that beyond what Twin Pines owns, beyond what Vermont State Housing Agency has in its portfolio, there are additional properties. So depending on your particular situation, if you look there, that's an additional resource.
I actually would like to speak to this question from personal experience. Back during the housing bubble under the Clinton administration, my wife and I we were renting long-term, and 4 times probably in 6 years, we had houses that we were renting long-term go on the market and get sold. So at first we thought we'd go into the business of getting houses ready to be sold because it kept happening over and over, but it was not fun. But one thing that a couple things we did was we really went and worked hard with realtors in the areas that we wanted to look to see if they knew of anyone who maybe had a house on the market for a long time and might want to just rent it. The other thing that we did was we put ads in like the Vermont Standard and the Valley News or wherever the papers would reach the area that we were looking in. And we got some really good responses under the searching for housing ads. It made a big difference and helped us to find things that like weren't being listed at necessarily the Dartmouth housing office. I would go there too, but that was really competitive. But those are 2 things we did. And we were really able to find some rentals that weren't necessarily as competitive because not many people knew about them. So just some suggestions or thoughts to keep in mind. The next question is, how do people find out about the assistance you both have available, and where do you advertise?
You want to go first?
Well, Ginevra is going to help us by putting the websites on the email that she'll send you all with all these contacts. And I was thinking we could put the 2 programs for rental assistance and mortgage assistance on there too. So it's through our websites. We've also done, I can't remember where we put our other one. I think we made sure that we told all town employees. We got it around the schools. We talked to the people that we thought would be interested. We also told realtors about this as well, because we recognize that people looking for houses are often talking to realtors. So we work with realtors too.
And I will say, for our programs, you can check out our website, and please, if you are interested in home ownership units that are being created at Safford Commons, please reach out to us either via email. We have a home ownership coordinator named Steve Usley. You can find his contact information on our website, but you can also feel free to email me or call and make sure you're added to the list of folks to get information. One of the challenges that we were actually talking about, and we haven't settled on a final plan, is how do we make sure that as many people as possible hear about these new homeownership opportunities. Twin Pines has not done a big new ownership project since we did Guile Hill, which is in Hanover, and that was back right around the Great Recession. So, it's a little bit figuring out the best way to make sure that we reach as wide an audience as possible, whether it's listservs, whether it's reaching out to major employers, whether it's reaching out to town employers and town offices to make sure that they're getting the word out to employees so that employees can live in the town where they work. Those are all going to be things that we look at, but definitely, I'm always open to new ideas if people have them.
Thank you both. We're well past our 6:30 mark, so I think that's a good note to end it on. And I will send out a follow-up email with any information that you would both like to include in that email and a recording of this event. So yeah, just thank you both so much. People are commenting here that they thought they had looked everywhere, but they got some new ideas for looking for spaces. So that's good. I'm really happy to hear that.
Yes, thank you both.
Thank you for hosting us and giving us a chance to talk about affordable housing.
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone have a good evening.
Yeah, good night.
You too.
Yeah.